Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 36th episode of Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I'm Cullen McFater, and as always, am joined by Clark Coffey. How's
Hello.
it going?
It's going well, man. How are you?
I'm great. Very busy right now, but ready to talk
With
about this
fun
film.
stuff, right? With fun film
Exactly.
stuff. That's
The
awesome.
important stuff in life, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's good.
But yeah, I'm excited to talk about At Close Range, which is our movie for this episode, the 1986 James Foley film starring Sean Penn and Christopher Walken. Of course, this was your choice. So why don't you tell us a little bit
It was
why
my
you
choice,
chose
and
this movie? Yeah.
I bet you guys out there couldn't see this one coming.
Yeah.
It is a little more obscure than maybe a lot of the films that we've covered in the past, but and it may not be like universally acclaimed. It's this little film, like you said, directed by James Foley in 1986. It stars a young, I think, 25-year-old Sean Penn. You've got a youngish Christopher Walken, Mary Stuart Masterson, even Chris Penn.
His brother. Yeah.
Yep, and even Sean's mother is in the film playing his grandmother. There's even oh my gosh, who else is in there? Crispin Glover is in this film. He has a super small role. We've got Kiefer Sutherland is in this film again, almost an extra. I don't even know if he has.
Super
young. So it's an interesting film in that regards. You can see a lot of people at the beginning of their careers, but yeah, I mean, just kind of my personal relationship to the film. This was a film that I saw when it was probably, I was maybe 12 years old or so. So I saw this at home. And actually, it was a film that my father really liked. And he was a big fan of Christopher Walken's. And he felt like the performances between Sean Penn and Christopher Walken were fantastic in this film, and I have to say I agree. So this is a film that I actually kind of grew up on, watched this young, and it was a pretty intense film, as you can imagine, watching it at such a young age.
Yes,
So that's kind of my relationship to it. Saw it when I was young. It was, my father was a fan. He introduced me to it. So I have kind of that warm, fuzzy, kind of nostalgic, father-son kind of relationship to this film. Thankfully, nowhere near the kind of father-son relationship that
occurs in the film.
And Sean Penn. Thankfully, nowhere near anything like that. But I think you and I have talked about this. You've talked about how your father, that's a big part of why you love film, watching films with your father. That's the exact same thing with me. That's, and, I was kind of thinking of films to suggest for the podcast. And I wanted to suggest something that maybe people hadn't heard of, maybe not an obvious choice. It's probably not going to be on anybody's, top 10 list or anything like that, not even close. It was, the critical reception was split when the film came out, and it was definitely not a commercially successful film. And matter of fact, I mean, James Foley, I think the latest things that he's done, he did some of the House of Cards episodes, but he directed the two sequels to the 50 Shades of Grey, or is that
not even the original, just the sequels.
The two sequels. And so I have no idea. I can't speak to anything about those films. It's not a film that I was interested. Those films were not films I was interested in seeing, so I've not seen them. I can't speak to them. But he's still out there making movies, apparently. And this was one of his biggest. He also directed Glengarry Glen Ross. That's probably a film that most people might know him by. And obviously everybody knows Penn and Walken, but yeah, so I did suggest it, and I'm really curious to hear about, your viewing.
I think it's actually funny that you suggested this movie, because a few weeks ago, a friend of mine, Yona Lewis, who is a great director here in Toronto, and actually just had a really successful film release at TIFF 2019 before, of course, the pandemic shut everything down. But he posted he on their production company Instagram page, Lisa Pictures, they just post kind of like screenshots of movies that they like and are watching at the time and stuff like that. And so a few weeks ago, this shot from one of the shots from this movie, the shot of Christopher Walken and Christopher Penn talking in the field, was posted to their account, and it's like this, it looks
beautiful.
I think it's the best looking shot in the movie. And I just was very fascinated with it and thought that it was like, it's a very mesmerizing image. And
what a coincidence.
It's funny that you then suggested this movie, and I didn't even realize that they were the same movie until that scene came along. And then I was like, I've seen this
Well,
really
see, your friend
recently.
has good
So
taste.
I went and scrolled back, and lo and behold, there it was on the on their Instagram. So funny that that's just like a little, a coincidence. But yeah, so
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
never seen this movie before. And yeah, it was one of those movies that, like, I think what will make this episode really interesting is it was much more of a the scene to scene of it was relatively hit or miss, and I don't mean that
Okay.
in a completely negative way. But what made it really interesting, I think, for me to watch it, and I almost think that that was in a way a positive in terms of the viewing experience, because I was super engaged throughout.
Yeah.
Like, this movie really kind of almost challenged me mentally to, like, think about why things aren't working for me, or think about, what would I have done differently, or
Hmm.
even just on a matter of, like, the cinematography, what isn't working for me in certain scenes.
Now
And
I
that's
got a
what was kind of
question.
interesting.
I got a
Yeah,
question
sure.
to add.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to riff on this, so I'm curious. So I mean, kind of, as people who are so obsessed with film, I
Hmm.
find myself doing this pretty frequently throughout films. Period. Right. No matter what the film is, I'm
Oh,
guessing you,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I'm guessing you
Yeah.
do too. But I'm curious. I mean, did you feel like the story didn't kind of pull you in, or the characters didn't pull you in, more than your average film? And is that why you were kind of focused more on, you
No,
know,
I actually thought the story was strong. I thought that
okay,
the script was strong, and that there was nothing.
I see.
Again, there was I wouldn't really describe it as like the highs were highs and the lows were lows, because there weren't
Yeah.
really any lows. Like, there was
Okay.
nothing in the movie that I found myself scoffing at or going like that was horrible.
It's
It
scoffing.
was more so just that there were elements of it that I thought um, were missed opportunities in a way,
Okay.
that I feel like the and we'll of course get into details of like the scene to scene in a bit, but
Right.
there were just a few moments in the movie that stuck out to me as, that could have really, really impacted me had it been done just slightly differently, or had they gone a little bit further with certain things. And I don't mean, of course, ramping up gore or anything like that, but just
Right.
certain, like, tweaks in the way that scenes are directed, or the way that scenes are edited or staged. And I think that the reason that I really like watching movies like this, and movies that I, even though, I wasn't blown away, that I think the thing that I really like about watching movies like that is that it does really get your brain working, and it gets your brain thinking, like, okay, where where did it work, and where did it not for me? And
Yeah.
and so and aside from that as well, I think this movie is, like, oozing with choice in terms of direction. It's oozing with
It's
character.
very well directed, in my personal
Yeah.
opinion. I
And
feel
it's
like
it's
it's very
really,
strongly directed.
you can feel the vision in it. I think that that's
Yeah.
something that is indicative of very much of the time that it came out, that movies were just, in my opinion, like, on a grander scale, less of a product. And of course, they were always designed to make money, and that's what filmmaking,
Right.
the industry of filmmaking, has always been. But in a very, like, real sense, I would take this movie over most movies that have come out in the past 20 years, simply because of the fact that I feel like there was choice in it, and there was there was
Well,
there was
let's
distinct choice. Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, context is important. So,
Hmm.
to kind of put this film back, right? We're talking 1986. This is, I think it had a budget of $6.5 million at the time, which would definitely make this a small mid-budget film. Even then, yeah, I do the math on inflation, but maybe you're looking at what, $20 million today, or $25 million today. So,
Hmm.
and it's a sadness to me that I don't think these kind of made for adult audiences, these mature films that are character driven, um I just don't think that this many that films for wide theatrical release, right?
Especially, yes. Yeah.
That's just not now. Where would this film exist in today's day and age? This film maybe would exist on Netflix, maybe this would exist at Amazon Prime. It would
Hmm.
be buried, pages deep in their search in the search results, and you'd likely never find it. So I'm sad that these kind of films don't exist so much anymore. So when I watch this film, I kind of look back, sure, rose-colored glasses, a bit of nostalgia, but I've already admitted that that I'm definitely looking at this film nostalgically. But
Hmm.
I think it's sad that we don't have films like this.
Yeah, like, when you can really just feel the idea that it's kind of raw filmmaking in a way, that it's just
Well, this would
people
very
going
much
out to tell a story, and
this
it's
would be
like,
an independent film today. Like this
yeah,
would be, And
Of
I mean
course.
like
Yeah, yeah.
indie. Like this
Yeah.
would be an indie film if it were
Yeah,
made
this would
today.
maybe get a premiere at like Sundance or something. Yeah.
If it were lucky.
And so
And
yeah, I do think that that's. I mean, again, the thing that I think is really interesting, and I really want to kind of emphasize too, is that I watched some of my favorite movies in the same way. That a lot of the movies that I think affected me, or that I grew up loving, or that I still love to this day, are very much movies that I do still find a lot of faults in.
mhm.
And even more recently, like a movie like Split that Shyamalan did, I think back in 2017. I think that came out. It was the sequel, the secret sequel to Unbreakable, starring James
I
McAvoy. And
think I've seen that film.
um,
Yeah.
that's a movie that didn't go crazy. It was kind of heralded as Shyamalan's comeback. Like,
Return.
didn't get
Yeah.
like a huge, like, it wasn't like it blew the box office away or something like that.
Yeah.
But
2016
that's a
was when
movie
that
that I really, yeah, 2016, and
with
that's a movie that I
McAvoy.
really
Yeah.
liked. And like, because again, and the reason I'm comparing it to this is just because I felt like there was a lot of creative decision behind it. There
Yeah.
was a lot of passion
There's
behind it from
perspective.
Shyamalan, and there
There's
was
opinion.
perspective, and there was
Yeah.
point of view. Yeah. And
Yes.
so when I say that, like, there are, I don't mean to sound necessarily nitpicky with a movie like this, but rather, again, to me, I take any movie, whether it's great or whether it's really bad, as kind of more of an exercise for learning. And so
Right.
that's very much where I'm coming from with the
I gotcha.
critique to this. Yeah.
So I
Um,
think so. If I'm understanding, it's not so much, well, like, is it a good or bad film or what? It's more about, anytime an artist has a strong opinion, they're coming from a strong point of view or perspective. I mean, naturally, some of these things are going to maybe not be the points of view that you have, and so,
exactly. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but that's what's wonderful. I mean, I see those things and it makes me smile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying too,
Yeah,
is
I had
that,
no trouble making it through this movie. Like, I think
yeah,
that's another thing that's important to say, is that there was, it wasn't a point, like, even when I saw things that I didn't necessarily like jive with,
yeah,
it wasn't me looking at this, my watch and going like, okay, when's this going to be over? I was thoroughly engaged, thoroughly enjoying myself throughout. And again, a lot of that, I think, is because of the fact that I was kind of like picking it apart in my brain as it went along, and I was kind of
yeah.
like going like, that's a really interesting choice. And I would take an interesting choice that doesn't work over a
Over no
boring
choice.
choice that doesn't work
Over content.
10 times out of 10.
Over
Yeah, over
content,
content,
quote unquote.
exactly.
I mean, it's
um
it's also fun too. I just want to talk a little bit, just as we're kind of talking about context, the era of the film. There's some fun kind of little pieces of trivia, I guess, for lack of a better term, as to how this
mhm,
film kind of came to be. If we take ourselves back to 1986, this is in the beginning, obviously, of Sean Penn's career. He had done, a handful of films, but
mhm,
uh, but he was definitely on the rise. And it's my understanding that he actually he brought this film to Foley, so he had the script,
mhm,
and he took it to Foley, and apparently that Foley's first film, which was a film that was released in '84 called Reckless. Sean Penn actually auditioned for that film. Obviously, he didn't get cast, but the two became friends. Is my understanding. So much so, in fact, that that Sean Penn actually lived with Foley
oh wow, I did not know that.
for
Yeah.
roughly about a year, before they started shooting on this film. So it's my understanding that, the two of them really worked this film, massaged the script, worked the story, worked the characters together for a long period of time before they went into production. So
Mhm.
it's very much, I think you could say that, Sean Penn had, at least as much to do with this film as Foley, in that
What an
sense.
interesting relationship to have with the director too. That,
Right.
like, I mean, I imagine that means that on the set of this, they would have probably had a really, really unique working relationship.
I would
That
imagine a very close one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the things that I think is really crucial to any director. Is I can't imagine being a director who, and some directors don't care, but some directors just like, they'll hire anyone on their crew. They don't have to know them. They don't really care about their prior history with them. That they're
Mm,
just kind of more of like, as long as they get the job done. Whereas I find that I kind of relate a lot more to directors who, you know, keep the same crew, keep working with the same crew, and have built
yeah.
up that relationship. And I think cast as well. And There's nothing more difficult for me. Not that I have difficulty or trouble meeting new people or speaking to people I don't know, but rather that, I can just imagine that one of the reasons that Sean Penn's performance in this movie is so strong is because that the director just probably, they had a very clear understanding of each other,
Yeah.
and likely had a very easy time communicating.
Yeah.
So
Well, so much
no,
of
that's, again, I don't know what the production of this movie was like. There's not a lot of information on it,
yeah.
but I would assume that would be a really positive thing for performances and for,
Well, I would think so for most of, I mean, I'm the same as you. I mean, when I work, I mean, I mean, I'll be really perfectly quite honest. I mean, it's helpful for me, whether I'm acting, whether I'm directing, to feel really comfortable around the people I'm working with is a
mhm,
really important thing for me. Just from a self-confidence perspective, from a vulnerability of performance perspective, from, feeling like I have a, space for my authentic voice, which it can be scary. I think if you're
yeah,
working around people that you don't know well, or it's not so much that there's an issue with them or whatever. It's just you don't know them. So it's all of us feel more comfortable around people that we actually know. So when I direct things, often you don't have the time. Most people are you don't have time to go like live, invite your lead actors over to live with you for a year before
yes,
you shoot.
yeah.
We don't, but this is one of the
Nor a
things that
lot
I
of
love.
times I don't think people would want to, but
No, no, no. And let me be clear, that's not what I would want either.
yeah,
That's a bit extreme. And I think that kind of happened because Sean actually didn't have a
yeah,
place
I
to
think that was
live.
just a,
He was
exactly,
living, yeah, he
exactly.
was living with his girlfriend. And actually it's another, speaking of girlfriends, of course, Sean Penn had started dating Madonna at this point, and
Hmm.
clearly she's involved in the film. If you watch the ending credits, she's got the largest credit in of the entire
It's like the
crawl.
first
It's
song,
the
or it's the
first
first credit.
it's the
Yeah.
first credit, and it's the I mean her font is like 5 times the font of everybody else's credit there. But
Hmm.
of course, she provided the, I guess, the theme song for the film Live to Tell. And I'm not a big Madonna fan. I We were just talking about this, Cullen. I grew up though when Madonna was, her and Michael Jackson were the largest pop stars in the world.
Yeah.
Madonna, it's hard to explain. You had kind of said, well, yeah, she was kind of like the Lady Gaga and I was like, I don't even know if that does it. Because
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
then, when you had MTV and terrestrial radio and vinyl records, and that was about it, and audiences weren't so splintered among so many avenues. I mean, it was like the Madonna's album sales at that period of time were just astronomical.
Hmm.
She was just a huge uh, popular culture phenomenon. But anyway, my point is just that, because of her involvement with Sean Penn, we get her providing a track for the film, which was more successful than the film itself.
Yeah.
And we actually have Madonna's, uh, her kind of like musical, I guess, co-creator, if you will. I mean, the guy who provides the score for the film actually worked with her. Patrick Leonard was actually a co-songwriter, co-writer, and co-producer for most of her huge hits from that era. Was
Hmm.
her musical director on her big tours, the Virgin Tour, and so. And we can talk about the score a little bit later when we get to that, but it's just interesting, kind of all these little relationship kind
Yeah. The
of
connections between, yeah.
connections. And of course that's kind of like how we find like all of the people or many of the people that we that I end up working on films. It's interesting to kind of look back. I don't know, Colin, if you've done this, it's amazing, just a little like web of connections that you make and people that you
Yeah.
meet. And um,
Surprisingly small world.
it's a surprisingly tiny world. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
that's kind of like a fun thing for me to kind of like look at for films. I'm like, how do these people meet each other? How did these
Yeah.
people come together? It's like I wouldn't expect Madonna to be providing at the like height of her fame to be providing a song for this little $6.5 million film. But
Hmm.
super interesting. I guess too, just to kind of give a little bit of background on this too, the story. And I
Hmm.
was curious about, if you felt like the story, was it something that grabbed you? But the father son kind of relationship aspect of this film was something that struck me. I think like any son, regardless of what your relationship with is your father is like, is probably, I mean, it's like, your desire for your father to be proud of you, to be accepted by your
Yes. Yeah.
father. This is the kind of a fundamental kind of aspect, I think, of
It's a
what
very simple story. Yeah.
it's very simple, and I think it's like we all can relate. So even though, yes, the story is about, and actually it's very loosely based on a true story, and a book called "Jailing the Johnston Gang," was about these criminals, this gang of criminals in rural Pennsylvania. Very loosely based on that. I don't think they cared at all about trying to stay close to any
Yeah,
kind of
because the movie's set in
factual.
Tennessee, and yeah,
Exactly. So it doesn't even, but I don't know, that aspect of it always, it resonated with me.
yeah,
Did
yeah.
you feel any of that? Did that kind of come across to you? Like, kind of, what was your take on the story overall? And I
Yeah, no, I think that it was the story is engaging. I mean, it's again, it's a very simple story, which I think works in its favor. It's the I think what's and I think of what's really a testament to Penn's performance, especially, is that you do feel definitely the motivation there of his
yeah.
character. Like he plays that, but not in such a ridiculously, it's not like a dance movie where he's like, I just want to dance, and
Are
it's
you
and
talking
you,
about Footloose?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
that
maybe,
movie's
or
awesome.
Breaking Two, Electric Boogaloo, but um,
Hey, so wait, is that our next two films then? Footloose and Breaking Two?
yeah,
Like,
Breaking
all right,
Two.
awesome. Let me write that down.
The dancing pregnant ladies, they're the best. But no, you really do. There's like an element to it that you really feel come through Penn's performance, and I think that not to say that the story doesn't isn't engaging on its own, because I think the story is wonderful in terms of the way it's written and the way it's presented.
Yeah.
Um, but I think you get this very nuanced performance from Penn. I think that Penn's a very understated actor in that he doesn't, like, even right from
Well,
the
in this
opening
film,
scene.
not
Yeah,
always,
you
not
not
always,
always.
which
Yeah,
is
there
interesting
are
to note.
roles, of course,
Yeah,
he gives where
where
he's
he really chews the
bigger,
scenery. Yeah.
but but like even the opening scene in this film when he's just kind of like, you know perhaps apart from the part where he rides the car, but the like the just
Aha,
the way
yeah.
that he performs that bit about, give us the $5 back, and it's this really,
Very
again, it's not like
understated.
he's not going crazy with it, he's not like showing anger, he's just kind of, he's got this sort of like almost proto menace to him, where you can see, he did a really great job of almost like mimicking some of Christopher Walken's kind of mannerisms in
Mannerisms,
that
yeah.
way. And so I think that that's something that shows what a talent he was, and I think that plays into the story very well, and really, I think, heightens the story, and amplifies some of the elements of the story that are really important, really key, which is, again, that father-son relationship.
Yeah.
And then of course Walken's great as well. He's got a perfect mustache, and just like me. So.
Just like you. That's right. You're rocking it's too bad people can't see, but you have done an excellent job emulating Walken's mustache, from his character in this film right now. We
Yeah.
may have to change our cover art for this
Yes.
episode to a close-up of your mustache. It's so fantastic. But
At close range. Yeah.
I do oh my gosh. Right. So that's, yeah, I we could riff on that for a long time, but right. What was at close range? The mustache was at close
Exactly.
range.
Yeah.
I
No,
love it.
but again, it's that's exactly what I think is so great. I think that this movie, again, is a really perfect example of, like I said, just that kind of,
Well,
you can really
simple story
feel
told well.
everybody involved wanted to be there and wanted to be involved and wanted to be making this, and Walken hams up the scenery, and is very Walken in that way, very sleazy,
I think
and
it's a
that, like,
great performance. We
yeah,
could get
no,
into some
it's fantastic.
performances
Yeah.
later. Yeah, yeah. And I think too, I do think that they did a good job. So I don't know exactly where you can maybe speak to kind of what environment you grew up in, but for me, I grew up in the Midwest, and a lot of the time I spent in smaller towns. When I was born in a very, very, very small town in the
Hmm.
Boot Heel, which is the southeast of Missouri, which is actually right there on the border of Tennessee. So I grew up not too far away from where this was filmed, not where the story factually took place in the book it was based on, but where it was filmed. And I didn't live there too long though, and we moved up north to outside St. Louis. But so much of my family was from there. So my grandparents on both sides of my family, I would spend a lot of time there on farms. My mother's parents were farmers, and I
Hmm.
would spend a lot of my summers there. So I definitely grew up in these kind of Midwestern, Southern-ish rural areas and spent a lot of time there when I was a kid. And I feel like they did a pretty darn good job of capturing that. Just and I think some of the ways that Foley kind of manages, and they're not obvious, it's not flagrant, it's not spectacle, but just how he kind of handles things spatially with, you mentioned the scene in the beginning where Sean Penn, where he rides the hood of a car because
Hmm.
a guy has stolen $5 from his brother, said he would buy him alcohol and didn't.
Hmm.
There's this town square kind of centering the story there and starting it in this small town square, and we instantly know
Where the
so much.
teenagers sort of hang out at night. Yeah.
We instantly know so much about the film. I mean, you've got, tractors slowing down traffic. If you've ever lived in a rural environment, you know that
Hmm.
that's, but they, I think told it so well. And, the scenes with, of Mary Stuart Masterson's character on the tractor. She lives in this small house, and they're surrounded by cornfields. And when Penn's character comes, and they have this really, which I think is a quite sweet, like representation of a young relationship starting. I think they really do a great job of that. So I don't know. I just kind of want to commend Foley for, I think establishing the setting and representing these characters in ways that I feel like I
Hmm.
recognized, and I recognized these places, and I felt like they did a good job with that.
And there's a
I don't.
little subtle shout out to Toronto in the movie. So there you go.
Oh, what was the shout out? Tell
Walken
me.
says when he's speeding, and he says you could, if you take the
Uh,
back roads, you're going. He
uh,
goes, you could go to Tennessee to Toronto and not
that's
see a
right.
cop the whole way. So you know,
And so I don't. You
got
probably
little
grew up in
points there.
more. Not only did you not grow up in the southern United States, but you probably didn't grow up in a rural area.
Yeah, well, I mean, Toronto's funny, especially like most Canadian cities are funny in that way because Toronto's a massive city, like
Right.
over 6 million people,
One of my favorites, by the way, and I'm not
and
just saying that.
but it doesn't take a long time to, I live a city adjacent to Toronto on the Lake Ontario, and so, but it really doesn't take long to, I drive half an hour away from my house and I'm in farmland, so it's
Yeah.
really there's not a lot of separation between rural areas and rural towns and stuff here, and as I'm sure is very similar in the Midwest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've never, my whole family has always lived in, I would say, the closest to non-city living in terms of my immediate family is that my mom grew up in Newfoundland.
Okay.
So she was born there and spent, until she was a teenager and came here for university. But so there's that, and I've gone out there and visited and several times and stuff like that, and it's a lovely place. But that's probably the closest in terms of my personal connection to kind of like living in the boonies and stuff like that.
I love it. Living in the
Um,
boonies.
exactly, yeah. So there's not really too much of like a personal connection there for me, but I could feel, one thing. I did work at a summer camp and go to a summer camp for a lot of my life, but then wound up working there, that is in this place in southern Ontario named Dunnville, and it's like this it's this, again, very much like a town like you would probably see in Tennessee, like lots of
Yeah.
tractors slowing down traffic, all farms around it, very simple town.
Yeah.
And so I thought that it was interesting that, like, what I thought was a really great job of this movie is that you can like feel the heat. You can feel that midsummer heat of like, where it's sort of humid and you get the dustiness
Oh
from the
yeah.
and there's no better thing than
You're
walking
right.
into some tree cover by like a little pond or something, and you can feel the cool air coming off of the pond, and so you really do feel the where I think a lot of other movies would just kind of skip over that element of it, the feeling of it.
Yeah.
This movie
Heavy
really
air,
buys into it.
heat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You're
Because I mean, the
right.
climates in the summer between, you go from up here where I live down to Tennessee, the climates during the summer months aren't a whole lot
Pretty
different.
much the same.
It's
Yeah.
very humid up here, gets
And
very
hot and humid.
hot,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it definitely did kind of speak to me in that way of just feeling I think again Foley does a really good job of making you feel, just because it's not, at its core it's technically a crime movie. It's sort of like almost like a mob movie,
Right.
but it isn't, it's not Goodfellas. You're not having these long montages of narration about like living in Sicily, or that a families are
Right. And it's
from the
definitely
same
not a New
lines.
York film. It's
Yeah,
not. This didn't
so
come
you
from
get this really
Scorsese. Yeah.
interesting and very unique, I think, like a story that's not really been told elsewhere a whole lot, about this kind of backcountry crime family.
And I want to
Um,
say this is interesting too. I just real quick because you mentioned like Goodfellas, and of course, Scorsese talks about how he grew up around these people, right? He
yeah.
grew up in New York, and he was kind of around these guys. He saw these guys, and like what 90% of his films are about these guys, right?
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
I may be exaggerating, but but not much. But Foley is from Brooklyn,
Yeah.
believe it or not. So it's
Yeah.
not like Foley grew up in Tennessee or grew up in the Midwest or, so I think, especially considering he does a good job. I mean, it felt
It doesn't
authentic to
feel
me.
disconnected. Yeah, it
No,
doesn't
no.
feel like someone who's like just coming, which there's a lot of movies that do. A good example of a movie that I think does feel quite disconnected from both the geography and the story is the Christopher Nolan remake of Insomnia, which of course is a remake of a Norwegian
Ah,
film. And the Norwegian film,
yes.
of course, because it's made by Norwegians in Norway, really exudes the
The
that
space.
northern
Yeah.
feeling and that endless light, that summer. And whereas the Nolan film seems more like it's set in Alaska as opposed to Norway, but it feels very much more like a director who hasn't really experienced a lot of this stuff going there and just trying to make a crime movie. So it
I
drops off a lot of the stuff that makes it so geographically relevant, and I didn't feel that with
yeah.
this. Yeah.
I was just going to say, coincidentally, I've seen Insomnia recently, and
Mhm.
I kind of thinking back to it now as you described this, I would agree with you. And
Mhm.
of course, Nolan has gone on from that film to be, one of the most successful
A pretty, yeah,
directors in the
big director,
world.
yes. Yeah.
But I would agree. I don't think that he utilized the set and setting anywhere near to the extent or the effectiveness, rather, that
Mhm.
Foley does in this film. And it's
Yeah.
important because these characters, how they relate to each other, the family is represented here. The rural nature, the kind of, I don't know, poor, close to poor, lower middle class for
Yes,
sure,
definitely.
right?
You go in and
Kind of
people spend their days smoking cigarettes on couches watching TV.
drinking
It's
beer, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah, and it's true. This is true. There's nothing to do, and kids, you live 100 miles from nowhere, from everywhere.
Mhm.
Kids got nothing to do but drive their cars around town in circles and get into trouble. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
you
so
know,
it's definitely, it feels very much again sort of, and I mentioned this to you, but it's interesting that we've done this so close to Rumblefish, because it
yeah.
does have, of course, different stories and very different styles, but sort of almost
Well,
similar like
they're
circumstances.
related. And look at the
Yeah,
father-son relationships, right?
yeah,
You have,
yeah.
think about it. Wow. So we're gonna like psychoanalyze me here in a second. So this is about brothers. This film is about brothers and their father, kind
Yep.
of at its core. And look at what a huge part that was, right? We've got two brothers. And although I don't think the relationship with the father was really at the heart of Rumblefish in the way it is, obviously, for this film, it's there.
It
It's
almost
important.
switches the focus from the relationship of the brothers to this relationship of the father.
So,
Um,
right? And they're
so
both
yeah.
like definitely set in the Midwest.
Hmm.
They're both films that came out. They came out very close. 86 for this film, and when was
83, right, for Rumblefish, or 84?
I think so, around there.
Yeah.
So see it. So these were films that I was watching when I was a kid, and clearly they resonated with me.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Very
So I
interesting.
do think that, yeah. So I just, yeah, that's just kind of one of the things that I noticed,
Yeah.
that they're
And I
and
would
so
agree with you. And the performances, there's kind of some similarities. You
yeah,
talked about how you felt like Sean Penn. You could kind of feel a certain sense of Matt Dillon
yeah, very,
in
and
Penn's
similar,
performance.
I guess just styles of characters.
Yeah,
This
just
like
Styles'
this
character.
this kind of, I guess, drifting kid doesn't know where he's supposed to belong, and kind of like wears, tank tops, is sort of a tough guy, and is a little
Right.
bit of a grease monkey in a way, and sort of similar characters.
Yeah, that's
So I do
very
think it's
interesting.
interesting that we did those movies so close together.
Well, and
Um,
and frank, I mean, it was not consciously intended, man. It was just
yeah,
literally, I'm sitting here saying, okay, what films are kind, when I just ask myself the question, what would I like to watch again? What do
yeah,
I think would be interesting to discuss? These are the films that have come up. I'm definitely not sitting here trying to calculate, well, what films would people be most interested in, or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no way that I could ever guess, and so I just pick what's interesting to me, and then fingers crossed, I hope it's interesting for someone else. And
Yeah.
and of course, a big part of it is that I am curious to hear your perspective and have a a conversation with you about these films. Obviously, I can never see this film in any kind of objective way, because again, it is a film from my childhood. So it's like curious to have this conversation with you, because you do have you have a totally objective viewpoint on it.
Hmm.
You have no history with it. So, well, so speaking of, thinking about talking about the film to you, one of the things I'm surprised that you didn't mention it like instantly, because I was just waiting for I was like waiting for the text from you. The cinematography.
Hmm.
One of the things that it was immediately noticeable to me. I mean, first of all, I think overall, I think it's a really beautiful film on the whole. But
Hmm.
one of the things that really jump out to me is that you've got longer lenses, and I know
Very long. Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
and I know that you're a big wide lens fan, and you want to shoot everything with like an 11 or something. And
Why? What do you mean? What are you saying? I like Malik? What is...
and I know, and I know that's kind of your orientation to it, but immediately you notice long lenses, you
Hmm.
notice a lot of compression, and you
A
also
lot of
notice
close-ups.
a lot of close-ups with these long lenses. Now, people look beautiful with these long lenses for sure, but
Hmm.
it's definitely not a style I think you would see it, a film shot in today. I could obviously, when I watched this as a kid, it wasn't something that stood out to me. I wasn't sitting there saying, "Oh, look at those long lenses and these
Hmm.
close-ups." But now watching it, I was pretty surprised by the lack of medium shots. There's hardly any, and no over the shoulders. I mean, it's like you've got two people talking to each other, and you just see their face, and we
Yeah. Yeah. And there's an example of actually a moment like that in the movie that I can think of, that was one of those moments where it was one of the kind of sticking out moments where I kind of went, that, like, I think I would have done that differently. And
right.
I
Well,
think
me
the
too.
part when
Yeah.
Christopher Walken walks in the house
Hmm.
to talk to the mother, and it like follows him entering the house and walking over to the kitchen where she's standing. She's doing something in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And to me, what would make that scene really interesting to me is if you just stuck on that wide of both of them in the kitchen and almost just played out the whole scene just in that single shot. But as soon as Walken gets in the kitchen,
They're isolated.
it cuts
They're
into the
floating
close-ups.
heads. They're
Yeah.
floating heads. Yeah, there's
So
a
I
lot
thought that
of
was really,
places.
like, again, and so again, it's one of those things that's certainly a it's not an objective thing. It's very subjective. So
Yeah.
different directors like different things. So it was interesting. It's always interesting to see kind of the opposite of what I would do stylistically in a movie, and see kind of how that works. And
I
um,
feel like in some ways it was almost shot for TV in some ways. Now, of course,
yeah, perhaps it was the
it,
budgetary. Yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe that was a budgetary situation, but only in the, I don't want to give the impression though that the whole film is shot this way. There's definitely some conversations where you might use wider shots, or two shots, or
Hmm.
or wider over the shoulders, where you really see both characters talking. And those are kind of some of the instances where you really see these close-ups, and you
Yeah.
don't usually see that today. It's in those circumstances where maybe you'd have a wider over the shoulder, and now you just have, I mean, seriously, it's like from chin to top of head
Hmm.
almost, or from like neck to top of head close-up. So it's the people look beautiful, but it is a little bit, does stand out. But
Well, and
there,
that's the other thing too, is that you're not, because this film is 235, but it's not anamorphic.
Mhm.
It's a spherical widescreen, and just so it's probably a two perf process.
Right.
Um, you're not getting, the advantage of having an anamorphic lens is, of course, if you want to shoot on a long lens like a 50, you're still getting the 25 width. You're still getting the horizontal value of a 25 millimeter lens. So
Yeah.
in an instance like this, where, like, let's say, James Foley wanted just close up after close up, had this been shot on a real anamorphic lens as opposed to spherical lenses, you would have almost gotten more width from those shots, and it wouldn't have felt so
Tight, so
tight
tight.
and close up. And so that's kind of an interesting choice too. There is that they didn't shoot on anamorphic; they shot on spherical lenses. And I also
That
think
could
it's
just be
funny too that
budgetary. That
oh
could
yeah,
have
of
been,
course,
a lot of
exactly.
this is shot out exterior at night.
Yeah, so it's likely that they did the lens, like, anamorphics are always going to be slower lenses than
Right.
spherical. So I think a lot of it was, yeah, just that, like, it'll be hell to try and shoot this on anamorphic at night, considering that we don't really have the time nor the budget to light intricately at night.
Yeah.
But I also think it's one thing that I noticed that's really neat is like every close up of Christopher Walken inside, there's always like this underlight, this light that comes up from under him
Yeah.
into like at the table in the
And there are
restaurant.
some scenes where it's really
Yeah,
obvious and it's
yeah.
totally unmotivated. And you
Mhm.
noticed some other places where we have unmotivated light
Yes,
here,
yeah.
that doesn't bother me necessarily.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
mind it depending on the style. I would say like
yeah,
another moment of unmotivated light is when they drown. I can't remember the character's name, but this guy that's kind of like, he's sort of like a
Lester,
weasel
I think is
almost.
his name.
Lester,
He's
so
a
yeah.
yeah,
And
a
so
guy
they
that's
drown him
snitching on
in
the
the
gang,
woods, and
basically.
it's this night. They're in like this kind of like little pond in the middle of the night, and there's this very clear spotlight that is like shining down right on the part of the pond that they drown him in. And again, it was one of those things that to me, again, likely was just a thing that they couldn't have an intricate setup because budget and time was too short. But to me, it was like one of those things. Again, I don't count this as a negative towards the film because it's still like I'm still learning something about like what I would do. But like if I were to shoot that scene, I would take that light, I would drop it down to the level that they were on, and I would put it kind of almost perpendicular to them so that you only almost see the outlines of the actors as
And then it could
opposed
be kind
to,
of motivated. You think it's
yeah. And
from a
so and I would
car, or
dim it
yeah.
down and make it less, but it really is, I mean, it does just sort of look like a spotlight right on the two guys. It's not, so I think that there's definitely moments like that throughout the film, and that was kind of thing that was interesting, is that almost every element of this movie, there were moments that I really liked, and there were moments that didn't not necessarily didn't work for me, but more so like
Yeah, you
disagreed
just
with
thought,
me.
hey, I'd do it different. Yeah. Well,
But I thought that it's interesting that nothing in the film was like totally A or B. It was a very mixed kind of thing. So like, because as I said, there was shots in this movie that I think are absolutely beautiful. The conversation between Christopher Walken and Christopher Penn at the end is this really beautiful. The shot that was posted on my friend's
that last
Instagram.
supper, the last supper
Yeah.
scene,
Oh, and
where
there's
where
yeah.
they're kind of posed, where the gang is mulling over the next actions they need to take, and
Yeah.
they're all sitting at that table, and we've got this beautiful, now that is wide, we have this really wide
Mhm.
shot and this beautiful haze and the light coming in across them, this beautiful god rays kind of coming through the window,
Yeah.
and we have this slow push, and it's all one shot. We never break in and start doing like singles or anything of the
Mhm.
conversation from, I mean, there are some extremely beautiful shots. I think we hadn't mentioned his name, and boy, I'm going to apologize now for probably mispronouncing his last name, but the DP on this film was Juan Ruiz Anchia. I'm so
Yeah. Really.
sorry, but
I would say,
maybe.
yeah, and she, or it's, yeah,
And he's a
yeah,
Spanish cinematographer, and
yeah.
he's done a ton of work with David Mamet, would be,
Hmm.
and Mike Figgis. But this is his fourth film,
Hmm.
and so his first film was in 1984, and
He
he had
also did
shot it.
Glenn Ross.
Yep, and he did He did House of Games. He's done a lot of. He did. I'm trying to think. There were a few other Mamet films. I feel. Yeah, he did Spartan. He did Phil Spector, which Mamet wrote. So
Hmm.
but I think his work overall is really actually quite nice. It was.
Yeah, I mean,
It
there's the
was.
one shot right after Terry is assaulted by Christopher Walken in
Yeah.
the film that it's her and her mother sitting at the table. I thought that like it's a really beautiful shot where you get this like a natural light coming in through the
Yeah.
screen door, and it just kind of
A
pulls
little bit of
back from the
haze
two of them.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I
so there's a
think.
lot of really great stuff, and again, even the shots that are less motivated light, or the shots that I pointed out as
They're
I
still
would do
interesting.
differently, they still look good.
They're still
At the end of the
interesting.
day,
There's
they
good
still
texture.
do look really good.
There's
Yeah.
good texture, there's good depth, and and most importantly, and I think this is key for all cinematography. I mean, it's motivated by the story. It works well with the story. There's a lot of visual storytelling going on here. You can
Mhm.
tell a lot about the relationships of the characters by how they're presented together. So yeah, I have to say, like, especially for the budget, the cinematography of this film rises well above the
Yes.
cinematography of
Yeah.
most of the films that this film would have been released, around. There's no
And I think
question.
that the other big thing too, for me at least, is like if a movie has really bad cinematography, it's not really worth talking about. So the fact
Right,
that we are like
pass.
really picking this apart and looking at it and analyzing it, to
No, it's a
me, is more so
compliment.
proof of,
No,
yeah, the
it's a
fact that
compliment.
it's interesting, and there's, again, and as I said, with in terms of the direction, I will take a choice that doesn't necessarily line up with my instincts 1,000 times over no choice at all, or
Isn't
just
that the
something that's
truth?
boring, or
Or
yeah.
something just boring. Yeah. Well, there's a couple
So
shots I
yeah,
want to steal. So if you,
exactly, yeah. There
so
are actually some
so
really,
you'll be
again,
watching a
even just
future
that
film.
lower shot for like the light that goes below Walken is like, it's a little bit on the nose in a few scenes where it's very,
But it
very clear,
works.
but it
It
works, and
worked,
it,
even though, I mean, even in my mind, I'm like, this is me holding a flashlight under my chin while I tell a ghost story at the campfire.
yes,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm literally, I'm like, it still works.
And
I don't know.
Walken has
It's
such a great facial structure for it too, like the way that his
well, let's
cheekbones are
talk
shaped,
about
and
that because
yeah,
performances is another area where this film, I think, really shines.
yes,
I
yeah.
think, I mean, I think you've got an extremely strong performance from Sean Penn, and you mentioned him a little earlier, and we were talking about how his performance here is very understated, and it is, and it's that the film that he made right before this film, and it's another film that I highly recommend, which is The Falcon and the Snowman. I mean, his character is over the top. I mean, it is way out there. And so
Hmm.
that's his performance right before this one. So it's not something you would instantly and automatically expect from Penn, that he would have this kind of nuanced and subtle performance.
Yeah, yeah,
A quiet performance, I would actually call this, like a shy performance almost, actually. I mean,
yeah.
he
Then
does
not,
have a swagger,
yeah.
he does have a confidence, but he's actually kind of a shy kid
Well, and
here.
even in the moments where like you'd expect, his girlfriend has just been shot and killed, like he's not doing the, Stella, like he's not like sitting
Thank
there
God.
freaking out, and it's very much, he just kind of silently, yeah, I would say the most he gets up in terms of emotion is right at the end of like the kind of the
Can
climax
we
scene in the kitchen.
can we have an extra, like a special edition of this podcast where you do some monologues from like Streetcar or
Yeah,
something? Would
yeah,
that
yeah,
be,
yeah.
could you, okay,
We'll go through a whole bunch of like Summer and Smoke and Streetcar Named Desire,
because
all
I
the
thought that
Tennessee
Stella was
Williams.
just fantastic, man. I mean, I don't know, man. Were you meant to
Maybe
be
Rebel Without a Cause.
were you meant to be behind the camera? Because I don't know, buddy. Do you have a manager yet, Cullen? Because
You sign me
I
up.
can help you out.
They'll cast me as the next
The
what's
next,
his
what?
name?
What would you want to be? Marlon
I was gonna say
Brando? The
Jimmy
next
Dean, but I was like, there already are
James
several of
Dean?
those. Um,
I think Jimmy Dean is sausages.
yes, that's a good point. Yes,
So I guess, yes, we could cast you as the next Jimmy Dean. We'll put you in a
maybe I'll
little
be the next
sausage
Sean Penn. We'll do a remake of At Close Range,
with,
but
and I
I will
could be
go
Christopher
completely
Walken because
crazy with it.
I could be Chris Walken because
Yeah.
I'm old enough. I'm about his age when he played
Hmm.
that, and you're
I don't want
about
anything
Sean.
to do with you, Dad. Yeah.
So I mean, that's another, Chris Walken, Chris, so apparently, I mean, obviously, I kind of already, I already told the story about how, Penn actually was kind of the prime mover behind this project. He had the
Hmm.
script, he brought the script to Foley. So he was, and he's the reason why the film was financed, as I understand it. But they really had to fight for Chris Walken.
Hmm.
It's my understanding that the studio didn't want him, that he was not on the list at that time. He was, he had done The Deer Hunter, but this is, that's almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
He hadn't been in a lot of big films, so they didn't consider him to be a box office draw at the time. So they wanted to admit a much bigger name, basically. So they really had to fight Foley and Penn for Walken, but I'm sure glad that they did.
Yeah.
Foley was talking about in the commentary for the film about how different the two actors worked, and this is always fascinating to me. Most of my background in study and experience is in acting, so this is an area where I'm, just really interested in how people work, because for every actor, there's a different way to work. Every actor works a little differently, but apparently, Sean had worked with the director. They had honed in on the character. Sean had the script and worked with the director for like a year before. But Chris Walken comes in a little later, and they work so differently. But Sean was very, very meticulous and specific with his character. But
Hmm.
Walken was like much looser and kind of, improvising a bit and kind of feeling things out on set during takes. Um, And so it's interesting that they had such different experience, but there's a fun little story. The scene at the end, which I think is a fantastic scene between the two of them, right? Where Penn confronts his father
Hmm.
at gunpoint in the kitchen after he had attempted to kill him and had successfully killed his girlfriend.
And his
Uh,
brother.
and his brother, right? I mean, yeah, and his brother. So he's killed his brother, he's killed his girlfriend, and Sean is riddled with bullets himself. He's patched himself up, and he's holding Walken at gunpoint. I think it's a fantastically acted scene, and I
Hmm.
think Walken's performance, especially, is outstanding. But hearing Foley tell the story, apparently Chris, he could not remember his lines to save his life, and
Which
he
I
doesn't.
think almost kind of works.
And I
But
was like, he doesn't even hardly have any lines. I mean,
yeah,
it's not like he has a monologue or something. He's kind of just reacting, to question, like,
yeah.
what? No, he's just kind of responding
You
to this.
think I killed your brother? I
Yeah,
didn't kill your brother. Yeah.
I love the accent. I love
I've
that.
been, what do you
Um,
mean? I've been getting drunk and going to nudie bars all night.
I
I mean,
love
that's
it.
kind of his line in the whole scene.
But yeah, so there's not much there, but apparently they had to put his lines on cards behind behind the
That's
camera.
hilarious. Poor little
So
Marlon Brando.
but it works out so well because it's like, you think Chris is like, he can't look his son, in the eyes. It looks like he's just this huge this just like cauldron of terror, that he's being held at gunpoint, but this, but also like, how can I find my way out of this? What
Yeah,
can I
sort of an
say to my
arrogance
son?
still about him.
Like
Yeah.
arrogance still, or this, he's trying to, I'm your father, I still have the power, you may have the
Hmm.
gun, but I'm your dad, I still control you. He's still, there's that, all that going on, and a lot of it is just like he's looking over to the side to read his lines off the card.
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, it's one of those rare situations where that almost works though, because he
It worked
does.
great, yeah.
They're definitely what I've read from that scene, and without knowing that, is just that he's not going to do it. Like
Right.
I'm like just kind of this like perceived, again, this arrogance of this character to just be like, I'm son, come on, you're not going to shoot your old man. So I think that that's really interesting. That actually was something that was possibly accidental, just from the fact that he had to, which is again also funny because he really doesn't have a lot of lines. This is
Yeah,
not a
no, it was just
this
funny,
is not
but
a Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now where he like refused to memorize 3-page monologues and just improvise. This
yeah,
is
just improvise. But I, kind of was just, kind of illustrating though that the looseness that, and every actor
yeah,
works different. That Walken
yeah,
wasn't sitting there, studying his script for hours and hours and hours.
yeah.
And I don't mean to tell that story to make it seem like Walken, didn't care about his performance, or that, um, but it, but from Foley's perspective, it was like, I get that it seemed like Walken had just kind of frozen up.
Yeah.
And that's why, not that he didn't care, which makes me feel fantastic, because every
Brain
time I hear,
farts.
every time I hear a story about somebody who I admire, who is clearly good at what they do, when you're reminded that they're just human and they freeze up too from time to time, I'm
Hmm.
always like, whew, okay, well then, I'm human too. It's all okay. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually love those stories, but it would have been a blast to kind of see these two work together. I think the bad guy, quote unquote, that Walken puts together for the father character in this film is just dynamite, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I think this is one of his strongest performances, frankly. And it's just the he just nails the, his character is just scary as all hell.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, just cold and ruthless, but totally charismatic, completely charismatic. And he's got this beautiful combination of those two things, right? Dangerous and charismatic. And you put it together and it's just outstanding. And you can
Hmm.
totally see why these sons would be riveted by this guy, right? He drives the cool cars, and he's like fun, and devil may care.
Hmm.
I mean, right? He's this like cool hip dude. It's almost like a rock star has come, into this tiny little trailer park.
Yeah, and there are similar, I would say, showings of like fathers in movies that are sort of like that, where it's like the dad is kind of absent but comes back and it's this cool, you
Right.
know, like
Hip dude.
flirtatious, wild, hip. Yeah, exactly. And then, and so yeah, there's definitely that. That's almost kind of a classic trope in a way, but
It
it's
is, because
not in a negative sense, and much more a sense that it works really well for the movie.
well, in reality, of course, what's happening is that you've got a man who's twice as old as this boy who has never grown up himself. That's like what's
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
happening. And so to the child, this guy looks super cool because he drives a
Yeah.
sports car, and his interests are literally the exact same as the interest of an 18-year-old boy,
But to
which is
anybody who's
but this
Walken's age,
guy's
it's like,
40. But this
yeah,
guy's 40.
exactly.
His interest should be very different. He
We all
shouldn't
know people like that.
we all know people like that. But
Yeah.
that's kind of these like stunted boy men, the only
Yeah.
people they do look cool to are these really young kids, because these kids don't have anything to compare it
And
to.
they've got no honor, and yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to know too. I want to say, that you're right in a sense that this film is kind of a gangster picture in some senses, um, but never. And I don't think, at least my interpretation, I don't think they ever glamorize the lifestyles of these characters.
No,
I don't
no.
think that they're romanticized at all. I think that you see these guys as pretty crusty dudes,
Yeah.
and they aren't fancy. They live in trailer parks themselves. It's not, but it's funny. I do want to mention really quickly, so in preparation for this, and generally I enjoy doing this anyway because I'm weird. I like to go watch, old movie reviews.
Hmm.
So I'm watching Siskel and Ebert's review of this film, in '86 when it was released, and it's so funny. You've got Siskel here. He starts off first talking about the film, and he's just overwhelmed with how violent the film is. Right? He's like,
Hmm.
I don't even know how somebody, like, he's like, yes, the performances are great. Okay, Sean Penn and Christopher Walken are great in this film, but boy, I really wish they wouldn't have, they would have found a better vehicle because it's just so violent. I can't stand it. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because now,
Hmm.
flash forward to today, and I'm thinking, I mean, even when you step in, let's say 8 years later, when you get into Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, I mean, this film is quaint, frankly,
Very tame.
when it
Very,
comes
very
to
tame.
violence compared to
Yeah.
any kind of films that, so
I
that
can't
was
really even
surprising.
think of like the, Sean Penn gets shot in the face at one point, but it's just kind of more of a
It's just
little,
buckshot. It's just
yeah, it's
buckshot.
just a
But
bite that he pulls out.
and
Yeah. And then there's
we've got the murders we talked about. I mean,
the drowning,
but
and
there's
yeah.
no. But I think it's, yet the violence is impactful. It's
Hmm.
impactful violence, right? The way it's shot. Anytime. I mean, you've got a father killing his own son, and being ruthless about it. The way that the violence is set up and the way it's told. I mean, it definitely is impactful, but
Hmm.
it isn't. I don't think it contains any more violence than many films. Um, but I do want to say too. So I just thought that was funny. Now, so Siskel, he was like thumbs down, thumbs down. But Ebert, my man, he liked the film.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so I was like happy to see, okay, well, at least At Close Range got Ebert's thumbs up. But so it's kind of funny how those things change in
I think I'm
time.
going to start doing that though, watching the reviews, because that's actually a fun kind of little
I mean,
thing
especially
to
these
do.
old ones. I don't want to go back and look at, because you can type in like At Close Range or any other film reviews on YouTube, for example, and you're going to get
Yeah, it's contemporary people. Yeah.
contemporary reviews, and I'm not concerned with that so much. I want to watch the film on my own terms, and I can decide what I think about it
Yeah.
on my
You
own.
take a look at the reaction
But
then,
it's
though. It's
fun to see.
interesting.
Yes, it's fun to
Yeah.
see these time capsules of responses for the film when it was actually contemporary and came out. So
Hmm.
I think it's interesting. Well, speaking of contemporary, let's talk. We'll wrap up our podcast about this film with soundtrack and
Yeah.
music. We've not touched on that one yet, not too much, but we've got a really, really sparse score from Patrick Leonard here. Now
Hmm.
we do
Very,
have
very. Yeah.
Rihanna. What was your thought on that?
Really, it's just. I mean, the score is really just the one melody of the
Of
what's the
the
Madonna
theme,
song called?
Live to Tell.
Yeah, Live to Tell.
Yeah.
It's really just that kind of like there's no, and it's really only used, I would say, sort of like either over montage or transition. There's not really any moment where there's like an impactful score during any of the moments of tension, or things like
Right.
that. Like that's usually tends to be left silent in this. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's not, in my opinion, too much to say really about it, other than that it doesn't feel out of place. It works. It's not necessarily the music that I love in movies, that just kind of very
Well, it ain't John Williams.
Yeah, it's not John Williams, not Bernard Herrmann. It's not, but no, it works. I think that's what's important, is that it works for the movie.
I mean, I'm just going to say I like it. So I'll go out on a limb and I'm going to say I actually really enjoy it. Would it be,
Okay, yeah.
now, would it be the proper score for any other film? No. But was it the right score for this film? I think yes.
Yeah, that's what's important. Yeah.
And yes, you're right. I mean, there's basically what you have are just modifications on the same theme kind of throughout the film. And you're right. They aren't there, I don't think, to heighten impact and thankfully, in my opinion, to tell the audience like how you should think about what's going on right now.
Yeah.
They're not emotional cues, they're not action cues, and I'm okay with that. I really kind of see their atmosphere. It's almost like an ambient music, soundscape kind of in the background. I mean, they do punctuate moments, don't get me wrong, but I think that overall, when you tie this in with the story, with the cinematography, with just the rest of the film as a whole, I think that it really does a good job of kind of giving you this, setting the atmosphere for the story. It's just, so I don't know, I like it. And I will go one step further, even go like way out on a limb and say that I think that Live to Tell is actually a very good song. And it is, I think, Madonna's best song out of her entire repertoire. I think that it is.
Be careful, the Madonna fans are going to come after you.
Well, I didn't say, hey, look, you can have a different favorite song, but let me tell you why. I mean, it's so Madonna felt like when this song was actually written that she wasn't going to sing it. She felt like it was not in her register. And you can make arguments and, here and there about the quality of her singing, and on all these kind of things. I won't do that. But she felt like it was outside of her register. And I think she was kind of pushed to go ahead and give it a shot. I think that it's actually one of the most vulnerable performances that she gives in a song, and which you don't see from Madonna very often. You don't see her being kind of vulnerable. Actually, quite the opposite, I think, in her art and in her life. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other thing. But I just, for whatever reason, I think it's her best song. I think it works great here. And there you have it.
Fun movie. Definitely would recommend it. If you've got Amazon Prime, I think it's actually on the MGM channel on Amazon Prime, which I've got, which should be, I think, amalgamated into Prime anyway soon, because they just bought that whole
and is that in Canada up there? Because I know it's different.
I'm not sure if you guys have it's the MGM channel here. I'm not sure what
so check it out, like as with all these things, check it out online. I actually saw it on Blu-ray.
Right, you've owned,
and there's actually a recent imprint. It's actually very difficult to find. It's not released under the studio's archive or back catalog. It's actually, I think it was I'd have to go and look now. I can't remember, but a couple different small imprints.
Because it was Orion, I think, that distributed it initially. So and Orion sort of has had a shaky past few decades.
For sure.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So they've not released it, but it is available through some other channels. So, all right. Yeah. Well, on that note, Cullen, as always, man, it's been a blast. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being willing to check out one of my favorite films from my childhood. And I'm glad that you enjoyed it. That's awesome. Yeah. And hopefully everybody listening, if you've not seen the film already, maybe this has inspired you to go check it out. Anyway, until next time, sir, and everybody else out there, we'll catch you soon.